What happened on October 7th is horrific. And to defend that, to be an advocate for that, is evil.
Shalom and welcome to another episode of In Our Neighborhood. And I am joined today with a dear friend of mine and of Israel, Pastor Alan Jackson, who's in town once again. Alan, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to chat.
It's always a privilege to be in Jerusalem, and especially to be with you, Maddie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Alan, you've been on this Israel thing, air quotes, for quite some time, most of your life.
I have.
And we're witnessing, and you talk about this quite often, a substantial uptick in anti-Semitic discourse, anti-Semitic demonstrations, anti-Semitic sentiment openly displayed, specifically in the U.S., which is, your home country. How do you explain that? Like, what is the motive? What is the rationale behind this now becoming a thing again?
I never imagined I would see the kind of anti-Semitism in the United States that I see today, coming from the most respected academic institutions and their administrations and the presidents of those schools, which typically sets the tone for American academia in general, which is unacceptable. I didn't expect that to come after October the 7th. I thought what happened on that day was so beyond the pale that it was impossible to be an advocate for that. So I was surprised. I think really honestly, God is shaking the earth. I think with COVID, there was a shaking. And we began to see things in a different perspective. And I think I didn't recognize it at the time, but I think October the 7th was another shaking. I don't think the anti-Semitism is new. I think it was latent. It was in hiding. And it's been brought to the forefront again, which to me is encouraging. When you know what the problem is, then you can go address it. I've related it to COVID, so if you'll allow me again. During COVID, I realized that I couldn't trust the World Health Organization. I couldn't trust the CDC in the States, the Center for Disease Control. I realized the FBI was no longer a trustworthy source of information. But that didn't happen in 2020. That had been happening for years. I just wasn't aware of it. And so I think the gift, and I say that in a measured way, the gift of October 7th was it let us see what's been happening. I don't think the anti-Semitism began on October the 8th. I think it's been growing and building for quite a season. So it's a very important time to me to be an advocate for the Jewish people, to use our voice to say it's completely unacceptable what they're expressing. We can't tolerate it. We can't be silent. We can't stand in the shadows. We can't go to our churches and pray polite prayers while anti-Semitism rages in the streets. I mean, what happened on October 7th is horrific. And to defend that, to be an advocate for that, is evil.
I think what I found personally concerning is the Nazis at least were ashamed of what they did.
Right.
They hid it. Hamas was very open, both about their intentions, then about the actual, presentation. They released it on every social media platform imaginable. They made it available to the world. And I, as an Israeli, I remember the first days of the war as, these very, very traumatic days, very humiliating, very painful days. And to encounter, it was only a handful of days until the anti-Israel demonstrations started. And I still haven't been able to wrap my mind around it. People are openly saying we don't care about what's right and wrong. We're embracing alternative facts, which is a pretty word for lies. They're doing so openly. They're saying we don't want to hear what you have to say. Like, where do you find hope in that situation? And where do you go that's positive, that has, an upward tick in the future?
Well, I think we have to pay attention to something different. I've learned I won't give my thoughts to the daily news cycle. Maybe 5 or 10 minutes a day just to hear what's happening in the world. But I don't want them to interpret how I feel about it, because they lie. They don't tell the truth. They manipulate the facts, or they hide the facts. And so then I spend time looking for what I can see God's doing in the earth. What are the outcomes that I could only explain because of God's doing something? I don't believe God has to have the majority. He never has. If he needs the majority, Israel's in trouble.
I agree.
Because you're a minority in the neighborhood. You're never going to be the majority. And he's moving in the earth. I come to Israel to see my friends, and you're flourishing. And I don't hear that in the news at home.
No.
And the news is filled with despair, and you're horrible. And I come back to the land and I see my friends, and I think, it makes me smile. God's moving.
When you zoom out from October 7th and 2023, or even the 2020s in general, what does that story look like to you? When you say you find hope, when you say you find God's faithfulness?
Well, in the last 20 months, I have visited about 25 American cities and spoken to groups of Christian leaders, mostly pastors. And about half of them are depressed because since COVID, their churches are diminished greatly. Mm-hmm. The cities are in trouble, more violence, the most trouble I've ever seen them. But I also meet the people who say the people coming to their churches are more committed. They're more invested in God. And to me, that's tremendously encouraging. We're trying to align our lives with the purposes of God. Yeah. And I think the same thing is happening here. And it's one of the most exciting times of my life. It's not an easy time. Yeah. It's a hard time because I think we've got a difficult season to walk through. Between where we are and a better place, we're going to have to do some difficult things. But most of the best things in life are on the other side of difficult.
100% agree.
We've done all the easy, now let's go do the difficult things.
I think you phrase it beautifully. I jokingly always say, God promised he'll do everything that he said. He never said it was easy. And in this country, it never is easy. But I think in the West, specifically when you live a comfortable life, such as we did in Israel up to October 7th, it's easy to imagine and get in your head that my pleasure, my comfort, my personal success is in direct relationship to God's plan. That's not how God works. October 7th, it was like this amazing unifying moment because you're suddenly clear on why you're here, what's good, what's bad, what's important and what's unimportant.
Hard men make good times, and good times make soft men, and soft men make bad times, and bad times make hard men. Yeah. And I
love that quote.
That cycle, we've watched it. And it's biblical. I mean, it's played out over and over in Scripture. Yeah. What I tell the congregation, we're not the first generation who's wandered off the path. So at home, they want to say it's the end of the age. The Messiah is coming back because things, and I'm like, no, we were acting like pagans.
But it's both, it's all true at the same time.
Yes.
Because humanity's short-sightedness makes us look at history as obvious steps. Well, clearly we won the war. Clearly we succeeded financially. Clearly the U.S. is, the superpower of the world. It's like, no, it isn't.
It's not so clear.
No, not so clear in the moment. And you have to, and if you follow it, it's always these unique individuals that make decisions in the right time, people that stand up in their society and say, Amen. Hey guys, we're going in the wrong direction, and people listen.
And it's not usually the majority. It's a courageous group of people that can recognize the right direction. And then God, I believe, adds his blessing. In the American Revolution, only 25% of the colonists were in favor of the revolution. 25% were firmly against it. And half the people were they're just going to see how it played out. And 25% of the people bet everything, their future, their families, that there was a better way. And I think we follow that pattern through history. And it's the lazy idea that says we'll wait for the majority. Mm-hmm. If you know the right thing to do, then it's time to stand up and do the right thing. Stop waiting for somebody else to do it. You and I can become part of the solution.
So you described something I've heard from many other people, that church attendance is on the decline in the U.S.
The media gleefully reports that church attendance is down by at least a third. Announcing the death.
Since COVID?
Yes, the death of Christianity. That we're in a post-Christian culture. Yeah. But when I talked to a man that's done an extensive research project, he said they're counting traditional church attenders. Mm-hmm. They ignore the people that are using online, that are watching YouTube channels. Mm-hmm. They're ignoring all the new expressions, all the change, that's the growth side of what God is doing. And his thesis was there's actually more people engaged in faith and spiritual things and the pursuit of God than there's ever been. But there's change coming. We're not in the world we were in a decade ago. And so we have to learn new patterns and do new things. And we'll do a podcast and have a YouTube channel. The world is shifting and God is moving. So I want to raise my hand and say, if you're going, I want to go with you.
I want to take what you were saying about the church decline, quote unquote, one more step further.
Okay.
Because people in line with describing this, Christianity is dying in Europe and the U.S. and people don't attend churches anymore. Well, they'll say, well, the whole love of Israel thing is sort of a thing of the past. But it doesn't seem like the numbers are going down. It seems like in the way you describe it, every generation looks at it differently, approaches it differently, has a different sort of point of contact with it. But the sentiment is still there with people that care about the truth, with people that care about the scripture.
I think you're right. Every generation wants to condemn the ones coming behind them. It's human nature. They're softer than we were. Yeah. We had it harder, they have it easier. And I think we all hear that. But I have a good friend here, he's my age. And I've heard him say similar things. And I had a visit with him a few weeks ago. And he said, what happened on October 7th, he looked at me and he said, it proved me wrong.
Yeah, I've heard that.
He said, I watched the young people who were going into Gaza, and he said they were better soldiers than I was. They loved the land more. They loved what's happening here more. And it made me smile, because he said it with tears in his eyes. Mm-hmm. And I think we have to have the courage to show the generations behind us the right way. That's why we have to stand up. Yeah. I'm not trying to protect my retirement. I want to please the Lord in this season in my life, because I want to say to the younger people that are watching me, there is right and wrong, there is good and evil. And every generation has to make a decision for itself. And I think that's where the experience we have, not to be angry at the younger generations, but to encourage them to choose the right thing, and then cheer for them when we see them doing it, because they're going to have to make sacrifices for themselves. And if we try to protect them from those sacrifices, we will doom them to slavery, because easy is not the best way.
Yeah, never is.
No.
I think you make a very, very powerful point. Several, actually. One, on the fact that as humans we're unable to learn from the worldview of the previous generation. We have to experience it ourselves. Also, that we're short-sighted to the point where we feel like history is always ending in our own generation, and we do it again and again and again. And the people in 1967 thought it was the end of the world in Israel, and they were fighting the last battle they'd ever fight. And the people on October 7th did the same thing. They felt it was the last war we're ever going to fight, because if we don't fight that war, there will be no tomorrow.
Right.
It happens throughout history.
I agree, but I think there is one thing that's different. I think the rate of change has accelerated. And it's changing so quickly, nobody can keep up. When I can't make my technology work, I go get a 10-year-old and say, fix my phone or help me with my computer. And that's something relatively new. And in the midst of that, there's an intentional, purposeful attempt to rewrite our values, to say that the values that we would take from the Hebrew Bible or from a Judeo-Christian worldview, they're antiquated, they're out of date. So we're going to redefine family. We'll redefine what it means to have a life. And in doing that, they're introducing chaos. Mm-hmm. And we have to understand what is significant. One of the things I leave Israel that is more strengthened in me is you have a clarity that we don't have at home. You understand you have an adversary, and they're not on the other side of an ocean.
Yeah.
They're a few kilometers away. And we don't have that. We don't think we have to defend our freedom at home. We just think it's a gift that stays. And I think those of us who are people of faith have to understand there's a very purposeful, intentional attempt underway to use this season of tremendous change. And I think it's a season of great opportunity. We can sit down in Jerusalem with a camera and a light, and people in Africa or Central America or South America with a phone can watch what we're doing. Yeah. It's unheard of. So it's great opportunities, but it's also an opportunity for tremendous manipulation. And so I think it's more than just every generation has to make a decision. Now I think the generations have to work together to say these things you cannot trade away. And I don't think that's new. I think that's the arrogance. Otherwise, why would it say, talk about these things with your children when you're at home, when you sit at the table, when you walk along the street? I mean, we have that assignment. It's been given to us. And I think we have to be far more intentional with that. And I think the challenge for all of us is to say, I want to lead a life of faith. When it started to rain, Noah was a genius.
Yeah.
When the Red Sea parted, Moses is a hero. When Goliath fell over, David is a brilliant strategist. When Jesus came out of the tomb, the disciples made a really good bet when they left their fishing business. But there were a lot of places along those journeys where the outcome wasn't clear, and there was a tremendous amount of effort, and there was a lot of pressure and a lot of tension. And the people of faith have to be willing to live with that tension. And if we don't, we resort to a theoretical faith. And then we argue about what God used to do. And I'm not interested in that. We've got to go find what God is doing now, and how do we do that? And my friend, you model that so well for me when I come here, because you have to have a vision that God is real, or you're not going to exist. Yeah. The IDF is amazing, but it can't defend you against your enemies. And I think October the 7th reminded us all of that again. In that moment, the promises weren't as good as they needed to be. Yeah. But the one who watches over Israel doesn't slumber nor sleep. And so I know the outcome will be okay. But there's a tension while you live that out. And all of us have to live that. And so It doesn't mean you're a failure. I keep encouraging people, stop living where it's safe. Let's go serve the Lord. It's a better way.
Yeah, I think you do an incredible job of connecting the today's story of this land and the biblical basic faith. You've been coming here for, decades at this point. Israel's transformed multiple times in that season. We've gone from a country that was a miracle that it even existed, to a country that it was a miracle that had a currency that worked, to a country that suddenly everyone, it's obvious that you're a superpower in these fields. And here we are today again, where suddenly people are surprised again that we survived, even ourselves. And what kept us going on a national level is on the afternoon of October 7th, the day of October 8th, 9th, 10th, till you started seeing that uptick in our sort of control of the situation, as everyone went back to the original message. And the message was, we're fighting a battle of biblical scale. That is a biblical enemy. We're a biblical, superpower, and we're going to fight God's war. And you hear even secular people start quoting all these biblical scriptures. The eternal people have no fear. Why? Because you connect to that root of why we're here. And when that answer becomes clear as a people, I think anywhere in the world, why you're here, what you're supposed to do, the doubt disappears, the fear disappears, the question mark over what the next step is, it becomes a lot easier. Then you can have the faith to see it play out, even if it's not in your lifetime, which it usually isn't.
Yeah, God's timing and mine are different.
So you're bringing a group to the country.
We are.
You've done this many, many times before. This is a little different. We're at the back end of what I hope is the back end of a war. We don't really know when it's going to end. And people are going to have questions about their safety, their travel arrangements, insurance, 100 different things. How do you put them to rest as far as their concerns go? And how are you going to teach this trip differently than previous trips, if at all?
Yeah. Well, I think anytime we make a special effort for the Lord responds to us. It isn't that we are free of fear. We don't allow fear to be what dictates our behavior.
Yeah.
You can do courageous things while you have fear. The solution to the antidote to fear is not courage. The antidote to fear is trust. The psalmist said, when I'm afraid, I'll trust in you.
Yeah.
And so we can say, okay, it's a little frightening time, but I trust the Lord. And so we don't be reckless or foolish. We're not going to go to Mount Bental and look into Syria. We'll find places that are a bit safer, but there's lots to be seen and lots to do and lots of people to experience and a lot of places where we can go and smile and say, you're not alone, and all the Americans are not angry with Israel, and we'll have a valuable few days in the land. And God will meet those people. And then they'll go home and they'll tell hundreds of people. And they'll tell their children and their grandchildren. And then I have a problem next summer. What will I do with all the people that want to come? So,
good problem.
Yes.
We call that in Hebrew rich man's troubles. It's a
first world problems.
Yeah, no, it's a good kind of problem.
Yes. I would encourage anyone that's never visited the land to get a ticket and make a plan. If you've never been, it's a wonderful place. The food is amazing. The streets are safer than the streets in Nashville or Chicago or Miami. I promise. The children are playing in the streets in Jerusalem.
And the people are mostly nice.
The people aren't all nice anywhere, including my congregation.
I agree. Look, Pastor, I want to thank you for coming and taking the time. But I also want to thank you for continuously and religiously, in a good sense, standing up for Israel, fighting against anti-Semitism, educating, now it's generations at this point, to love God's land and God's people. I say that as an Israeli, I say that as a fellow disciple. And I think it's beautiful that you've been able to walk so many people through the process of experiencing this land. And I hope to see many more.
Me as well. And it makes me smile to see what God's done in your life. We've known one another for quite a while now.
Yeah.
And I've watched you mature through a season when lots of men step away. And I've watched you step closer.
Thank you.
And that's a wonderful thing to see. So you've encouraged me a great deal.
Thank you. Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.